Why attitude and habits matter more than talent, and the science that proves it. Here's something uncomfortable. The most talented person you know, the one who could outsell anyone, outthink anyone, outperform anyone on their best day, is probably stuck. Probably broke, probably still figuring things out. And the person quietly building something real, the one nobody called gifted, the one who got told no 100 times and kept showing up anyway, that person is pulling ahead. Every single week, not because they found some secret, but because they understood something most people never will. Consistent behavior always defeats occasional brilliance. Always. And if you don't understand why that's true at a mechanical level, not just as a nice idea, but as a neurological and strategic reality, you'll keep worshipping the wrong thing. You'll keep waiting for your talent to save you. And it won't. Let me break this down. Most people think about talent the way they think about lottery tickets. You either have it or you don't. You're either born with the gift of persuasion, the instinct for code, the eye for design, the charisma for leadership, or you're not. And if you're not, well, you just grind harder and hope for the best. That's the common understanding, and it sounds reasonable, but it's dead wrong and it costs people years. Here's why it's wrong. When you believe talent is the primary driver of success, you build your entire identity around peak moments. You remember the one time you crushed a presentation, the one deal you closed effortlessly, the one project where everything just clicked, and then you spend months, sometimes years, trying to recreate that feeling, waiting for inspiration, waiting for the mood, waiting for the right conditions, and while you're waiting, nothing gets built. No pipeline, no reputation, no compounding asset, nothing. Meanwhile, the person with mediocre talent but ironclad habits is making 10 calls a day, writing 1 article a week, following up with every contact, reviewing every conversation, not because they're inspired, because it's Tuesday, because that's what Tuesday looks like in their system. And after 6 months, they have a body of work, a network, a track record, and you have a collection of brilliant moments that nobody saw because they never made it out of your head. That's the real cost of the talent myth. It's not that talent is useless. It's that talent without stable output is invisible. And invisible talent generates 0 wealth, 0 relationships, 0 opportunities. So here's the core judgment I want you to sit with. Talent determines your ceiling. Attitude and habits determine your floor. And in the real world, in sales, in business, in building anything that lasts, your floor matters infinitely more than your ceiling. Because your floor is where you live every day. Your ceiling is where you visit on your best day. And nobody pays you for your best day. They pay you for your every day. Now let me explain why this is true at the level of your brain, because understanding the mechanism is what separates insight from platitude. Your brain has roughly 86 billion neurons. And the connections between those neurons, your synapses, are not fixed. They are plastic. They change based on what you repeatedly do. This is called synaptic plasticity, and it's the foundation of all learning. Every time you repeat a behavior, the neural pathway associated with that behavior gets strengthened. The myelin sheath, the insulation around the nerve fiber, gets thicker. The signal travels faster. The action becomes more automatic, more efficient, less effortful. This is not a metaphor. This is biology. When a salesperson practices objection handling every single day, not just reads about it, but actually practices it, speaks it out loud, reviews the conversation, adjusts the phrasing, that neural pathway gets carved deeper and deeper. After weeks, the response becomes semi-automatic. After months, it's fluid. After a year, it looks like talent. People watch them handle a difficult prospect and say, wow, they're a natural. No, they're not a natural. They're a practitioner. The naturalness you're seeing is the result of thousands of repetitions that you didn't see. Now contrast that with genuine talent, someone who has a natural verbal fluency, high social intelligence, fast processing speed. Those are real neurological advantages. But here's what talent doesn't give you. It doesn't give you the habit of showing up when you don't feel like it. It doesn't give you the discipline to review your failures. It doesn't give you the emotional resilience to hear no 14 times and make the 15th call with the same energy. Talent is a starting configuration. Habits are the operating system. And the operating system always wins over time because the operating system determines what runs, how often, and for how long. There's another layer here that most people miss completely, and it has to do with your brain's dopamine system. Dopamine is not, as pop culture tells you, the pleasure chemical. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It's the molecule of wanting, not having. Your brain releases dopamine when it predicts a reward is coming, not when the reward arrives. This is critical to understand. When you rely on talent, you're essentially relying on intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes you perform brilliantly, you get a dopamine spike, you feel amazing. Other times you don't, and you crash. Your motivation becomes erratic because your reward signal is erratic. You're essentially operating on a slot machine schedule, and yes, that's exciting, but it's also wildly unstable. It's why talented people are often described as inconsistent. Their neurochemistry is inconsistent because their behavior is inconsistent. But when you build habits, real habits, not just intentions, you shift your dopamine system from outcome dependent to process dependent. Your brain starts to anticipate the reward not from the result of the call, but from the act of making the call. Not from closing the deal, but from executing the follow-up sequence. The process itself becomes rewarding. And when that happens, you've done something extraordinary. You've decoupled your motivation from external validation. You no longer need the client to say yes for you to feel good about your day. You need yourself to execute the plan. That's a fundamentally different psychological architecture, and it's available to anyone, talent not required. Let me push this one level higher, into the realm of mental models and strategic thinking. Naval Ravikant talks about specific knowledge, the kind of knowledge that can't be trained for, that feels like play to you but looks like work to others. And people hear that and think, see, it's about talent, it's about finding your natural gift. But that's a shallow reading. What Naval actually emphasizes, over and over, is leverage and accountability and long-term compounding. Specific knowledge is the starting seed. But without consistent application, without building assets that compound, without putting your name on your work and showing up repeatedly in front of the same audience, that specific knowledge dies in your notebook. Naval himself has said, all the returns in life come from compound interest, and compound interest requires one thing above all else, uninterrupted accumulation. You can't compound what you don't consistently deposit. A brilliant insight you have once is worth almost nothing. A decent insight you publish every week for 2 years is worth a career. That's not poetry, that's math. Charlie Munger adds another dimension here. Munger's entire philosophy can be summarized in one move: avoid stupidity rather than seeking brilliance. He calls it the inversion principle. Instead of asking, how do I succeed? Ask, how would I guarantee failure? And the answer, almost always, is, be inconsistent, be reactive, chase every shiny opportunity, abandon systems when they don't produce immediate results, rely on bursts of genius instead of building reliable processes. Munger would look at the talent versus habits debate and say, of course habits win, because talent without habits is just a more entertaining form of failure. And he'd be right. The most dangerous version of this is the talented person who knows they're talented, because their talent becomes a psychological trap. Every time they succeed, it reinforces the belief that they don't need systems. Every time they fail, they attribute it to bad luck rather than bad process. They never build the feedback loops that would make them genuinely formidable. They stay at the level of raw ability forever, while people with half their talent and twice their discipline overtake them. This is also where the science of creativity intersects in a way most people don't expect. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who spent decades studying creative achievement, found something that surprised even him. The most creative people in his research, Nobel laureates, groundbreaking artists, transformative entrepreneurs, were not the most talented in the conventional sense. They were the most disciplined. They had routines. They protected their work hours. They showed up to the studio, the lab, the desk, regardless of whether they felt inspired. Csikszentmihalyi's conclusion was stark. Creativity is not a trait, it's a system output. It emerges from the interaction between a prepared mind, a structured domain, and a field that recognizes the contribution. Two of those three require habits. Only one even partially relates to innate ability. And here's the part that should really change how you think about this. Flow states, those peak experiences where time disappears and performance soars, are not random gifts from the universe. They are engineered. They require clear goals, immediate feedback, and a challenge level that slightly exceeds your current skill. In other words, flow is a product of deliberate setup, of habits, of systems. The person who sits down every morning at the same time, with the same ritual, facing a clearly defined task, that person enters flow more often than the genius who waits for the muse. Not because they're more talented. Because they've built the runway. This connects directly to something I've experienced building AI-powered sales training tools. The entire premise of the system I've developed is that sales growth doesn't come from inspiration, it comes from structured daily review. A salesperson uses the AI to debrief every conversation. What did the client actually say? What objection came up? How did I respond? What could I have said differently? What pattern am I seeing across the last 10 interactions? That's not glamorous. It's not a TED Talk moment. It's granular, repetitive, sometimes boring work, but it's the work that changes the neural wiring. It's the work that builds the instinct everyone later calls talent. Let me give you a concrete scenario to make this real. Imagine two salespeople, Alex and Jordan. Alex is gifted, sharp, witty, reads people like a book. In any single conversation, Alex outperforms almost everyone. Jordan is average, not particularly charismatic, not especially quick, but Jordan does something Alex never does. Jordan reviews every single call. Every evening, Jordan spends 20 minutes with a structured debrief. What went well, what didn't, what the client's real concern was versus what they said out loud, what Jordan will try differently tomorrow. Jordan tracks this, adjusts, iterates. After 3 months, here's what happens. Alex has closed some big deals when things went well, but Alex has also lost deals that should have been easy because the same mistakes keep showing up. Alex doesn't notice them because Alex never reviews. Alex's natural ability masks the errors just enough that they never feel urgent. Meanwhile, Jordan has built a personal database of what works. Jordan's close rate has gone from 18% to 31%. Not because Jordan suddenly became charismatic, because Jordan eliminated 3 recurring mistakes and added 2 response patterns that consistently move conversations forward. After a year, Jordan outearns Alex by 40%, and if you ask their colleagues who's more talented, everyone would still say Alex. But the income statement doesn't care about talent, it cares about conversion. And conversion is a habit-level outcome. This is the point where most people nod and say, yeah, habits are important, I know. And then they change nothing. So let me tell you why knowing this isn't enough and what actually has to shift. The problem is not that people don't value habits. The problem is that people try to build habits while still running on a talent-based identity. Deep down, they still believe that if they were good enough, they wouldn't need all this structure. They see systems and routines as training wheels, something you use until you get good and then you discard. This is exactly backwards. The best performers in the world have the most structure, not the least. Their systems are more sophisticated, not simpler. The structure doesn't limit them. It liberates them because it removes the decision fatigue and emotional noise that would otherwise consume their cognitive resources. This is what deliberate practice actually means, and most people misunderstand it completely. Anders Ericsson, who originated the research, was very specific. Deliberate practice is not just repetition. It's targeted repetition at the edge of your ability, with clear feedback, and with the explicit intention to improve a specific sub-skill. Most people who say they're practicing are actually just performing. They're doing the thing they already know how to do, in the way they already know how to do it, and calling it practice. That's not practice, that's maintenance, and maintenance doesn't grow you. Real practice is uncomfortable. It should be. If you're a salesperson and you're working on your discovery questions, real practice means writing out 10 different ways to ask about a client's budget constraint, rehearsing them out loud, getting feedback from a mentor, a peer, or an AI system, and then trying the new versions in live conversations and tracking which ones open the client up and which ones shut them down. That's one sub-skill, and it takes weeks to refine, but when you've refined it, you own it forever. It's yours. It's wired into your neural architecture. No one can take it from you. And it compounds with every other sub-skill you've refined the same way. Now here's where this connects to something bigger than individual performance. Naval makes an observation that I think is one of the most important ideas for anyone building a career in this era. You're not going to get rich renting out your time. The implication is that you need to build assets, things that work for you while you sleep, things that compound. And what are habits? Habits are the process by which you build assets. Every article you write is an asset. Every relationship you maintain is an asset. Every skill you refine is an asset. Every piece of content you publish is an asset, but only if you do it consistently. One article is a thought. 100 articles is a body of work. A body of work is a platform. A platform is leverage. And leverage is how ordinary people build extraordinary outcomes. This is also why attitude, not just habits, but attitude matters at a structural level. When I say attitude, I don't mean positive thinking in the superficial sense. I mean your orientation toward difficulty. Your default response to setback. Your relationship with discomfort. Here's the neuroscience behind this. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, fires when you encounter rejection, criticism, failure, or uncertainty. When it fires, it triggers a stress response. Cortisol floods your system. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, reasoning, and strategic thinking, gets partially suppressed. You literally become less intelligent under stress. Your field of vision narrows both literally and metaphorically. You stop seeing options. You start seeing threats. Now here's the critical insight. You cannot eliminate this response. It's hardwired, but you can train your recovery speed. You can reduce the duration and intensity of the amygdala hijack through repeated exposure and reappraisal. This is what attitude actually is at a neural level. It's the speed at which your prefrontal cortex regains control after your amygdala fires. And that speed is trainable. It's a habit. It's something you can deliberately practice. A salesperson who gets rejected and spends the next 3 hours in an emotional spiral, replaying the conversation, questioning their worth, catastrophizing about their pipeline, is not having a bad attitude. They're having an untrained amygdala recovery response, and the fix is not to think positive. The fix is exposure plus structured reflection. Face the rejection. Sit with the discomfort for 60 seconds without reacting. Then ask, what specifically happened? What was in my control? What will I do differently? This process, feel, pause, analyze, adjust, is the neural equivalent of doing reps at the gym. You're training your prefrontal cortex to reassert control faster. After hundreds of repetitions, What used to derail you for an afternoon derails you for 10 minutes. That's not a personality change. That's a trained response. That's attitude as a skill, not attitude as a trait. The Talmud, and I've spent time studying its business principles, has a profound idea embedded in its approach to commerce and personal development. Knowledge that does not enter action is not knowledge, it's decoration. The rabbinical scholars who compiled the Talmud were obsessed with application. Theory that stayed theoretical was considered incomplete, almost dishonest, and they were right. If you know that habits matter more than talent, but you don't have a single structured daily practice, you don't actually know it. You've heard it. That's different. Knowing is behavioral. Everything else is entertainment. This is also why I believe sales, broadly defined, is the ultimate testing ground for this principle. Because in sales, you can't hide behind theory. Either the client moved forward or they didn't. Either you followed up or you didn't. Either you improved your discovery process this quarter or you're still making the same mistakes you made last year. The numbers don't care about your potential. They reflect your patterns, and your patterns are your habits, period. And this applies far beyond professional salespeople. In this era, with AI reshaping entire industries, with jobs being restructured and eliminated, with the relationship between an individual and their income becoming increasingly entrepreneurial, everyone is selling. You're selling your expertise when you write a LinkedIn post. You're selling your reliability when you meet a deadline. You're selling your judgment when you propose a strategy. You're selling your vision when you pitch a partner, an investor, a collaborator. And in all of these contexts, the person who wins is not the person with the most impressive single performance. It's the person who performs reliably, consistently, predictably. Because trust, the foundation of all business relationships, is built on predictability, not brilliance, predictability. Let me address something that I know some of you are thinking. But Leon, what about the people who are both talented and disciplined? Don't they win? Yes, obviously. A talented person with excellent habits is formidable. I'm not arguing against talent. I'm arguing against the prioritization of talent. I'm arguing against the belief that talent is the bottleneck. For 95% of people, talent is not the bottleneck. Execution is the bottleneck. Follow-through is the bottleneck. Emotional regulation is the bottleneck. The willingness to do the boring, unglamorous work of daily improvement, that is the bottleneck. And here's the uncomfortable truth about talent that no one wants to say. Talent can actually be a liability if it's not paired with the right attitude. Because talent gives you early wins you didn't earn through process. And unearned wins teach you nothing about how to replicate success. They teach you to trust your instincts even when your instincts are wrong. They teach you that preparation is optional. They make you fragile, because the first time your talent isn't enough, and that time always comes, you have no system to fall back on. You have no practiced response to adversity. You just have a confused sense that the world has suddenly become unfair. Munger calls this the man with a hammer problem in reverse. The talented person has a powerful tool, their natural ability, and they use it for everything. But when the situation requires a different tool, patience, systematic analysis, emotional regulation, structured follow-up, they're lost. They don't have those tools because they never needed them before. Their talent was always enough, until it wasn't. Let me connect this to one more critical framework, and then I'll give you specific actions. There's a concept in learning science called interleaving, the practice of mixing different types of problems or skills in a single training session rather than focusing on one at a time. Research shows that interleaving produces slower initial progress but dramatically better long-term retention and transfer. It feels harder, it feels less productive, but it builds more flexible, more robust neural networks. This is a perfect metaphor for what habits do versus what talent does. Talent feels smooth, easy, fast, like you're gliding, but it's building narrow pathways efficient for familiar situations, brittle in unfamiliar ones. Habits feel rough, effortful, slow, like you're grinding, but they're building broad, interconnected pathways, robust, adaptable, transferable across contexts. The person with strong habits in sales can transfer those habits to leadership, to content creation, to partnership development, because the underlying skills, consistency, review, adjustment, follow-up, emotional regulation, are domain independent. The person relying on sales talent, that talent usually doesn't transfer, it's context-specific. It works in one room but not another. Cross-domain transfer, what Barbara Oakley calls the engine of breakthrough growth, doesn't come from talent. It comes from having practiced the underlying patterns enough times that they become portable. And you only practice underlying patterns when you have habits, not just ability. So here's what I want you to do. Not next month. Not when you feel ready. This week. First, identify the one skill in your work, sales, writing, coding, presenting, negotiating, where you're currently relying on raw ability instead of a structured practice. You'll know it because it's the skill where your performance is inconsistent. Great some days, terrible others. That inconsistency is the fingerprint of talent without habit. Name it, write it down. Second, build a daily 15-minute review ritual around that skill. After every significant interaction, a sales call, a meeting, a difficult email, spend 15 minutes answering 3 questions. What specifically happened? What was in my control? What will I try differently next time? Write the answers down, not in your head, on paper or in a document. The act of writing engages different neural circuits than thinking. It forces precision. It prevents the comfortable vagueness that lets you avoid your real mistakes. Third, track your patterns weekly. Every Sunday, look at your 5 daily reviews and ask, what mistake showed up more than once? That recurring mistake is your highest leverage improvement target, not your worst skill, not your biggest weakness, the recurring mistake, because that's the one your current habits are failing to correct. Fix that one thing. Then find the next one. This is how you build, not in dramatic leaps, but in precise, cumulative corrections that compound over months into a completely different level of performance. Fourth, detach your self-worth from your outcomes. This is the hardest one, and it's the one that makes everything else possible. When your identity is built on being talented, on being the person who just gets it, every failure is an identity threat. And identity threats trigger amygdala responses that shut down learning. You can't improve what you can't look at honestly. And you can't look at your performance honestly if every flaw feels like an attack on who you are. The shift is, I am not my last result, I am my process. My value is not what I achieved today. My value is the system I'm building that will achieve reliably over time. Fifth, find one accountability mechanism, a mentor. A peer who's building something similar, an AI tool that structures your reflection, a public commitment, a post, a video, a promise to someone you respect. Habits don't die from lack of motivation. They die from lack of external feedback. Your brain needs a signal from the environment that says, this matters, someone is watching, this counts. Build that signal into your week. Let me leave you with something that took me years to understand. Years of selling, building, failing, rebuilding, and studying every framework I could find on human performance and growth. The world doesn't reward what you're capable of. It rewards what you're reliable for. Talent is a promise. Habits are delivery. And in every market, in every relationship, in every career, delivery always wins. Not because it's fair, because it's how compound systems work. Small, consistent inputs create nonlinear outputs over time. Sporadic brilliance creates nothing but memories. You don't need more talent. You need a system you'll actually run. Tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. That's not motivational advice. That's structural reality. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If this changed how you think about your own growth, share your perspective. Follow for more, and let's keep building. I'll see you in the next one. Comment engagement question. What's one skill in your work where you know you've been relying on talent instead of building a real daily practice? And what would change if you spent 15 minutes a day reviewing it?